This week on Intrigued Full Effect.
I want to, just make sure you're okay. And I just want to give you a hug that lasts about 5 hours. Just be able to look into your eyes.
I'm Chandrea Thomas, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 33. And Happy New Year, by the way. I know it's been a while. In this podcast, I talk about curious cases, disappearances, and other stuff. And today I'm talking about the curious case and disappearance of 14-year-old Adagio Talifero from Camptonville, California. Adagio went missing with his father, 68-year-old Gerald Storm Talifero, on June 1st, 2018, after allegedly leaving for a boat trip. The father and son were supposed to sail from Goleta, California to Hawaii with some friends on a 30-foot sailboat from Washington State, but they never showed up to claim their tickets for their return flight from Hawaii back to California, and they were never seen again. And here's a side note. You'll hear me use the names Gerald and Storm interchangeably throughout the podcast when I refer to Adagio's father. I also received some shocking and exclusive information about the case. I spoke to Adagio's mother, Jinjee Garrick, and the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office about the case. This is what happened. Jinjee Garrick, thank you for talking to me about your son, Adagio, and your ex-husband, Gerald, also known as Storm, right? And then your son, you guys call him Daj?
Right, for sure.
That's a really cool name, by the way. I really like his name.
Nice, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. So tell me what happened. Like, let's go to the very beginning and walk our way through the situation for folks who may not be familiar with your son's story and your ex-husband's story. Yeah. What happened on June the 1st, 2018? Is that where everything started?
As far as the missing persons aspect of it, yeah. They left the farm they were living on. The people who live on the farm remember it being June 1st or 2nd that they left the farm. The farm is in like sort of northeastern California, close to the Nevada border by Nevada City, California, in a little tiny area called Camptonville. And I believe all that's in Yuba County. And they'd been living there for a few years. I live up in Canada with our two of our daughters. Our oldest two kids are on their own. We have 5 kids together. Adagio is the second to the youngest, and the youngest is still with me. So they were seen by Storm's oldest son from his previous marriage, his wife, my older son, Jome, who's 23 and lives in Santa Barbara, and a business partner of Storm's who I spoke to, who lives in Arizona, and another friend of Storm's in Santa Barbara. So 5 different people saw Storm between June 1st and June 7th, and he wasn't with Adagio. And this was kind of confusing to everybody, and they all asked, where's Adagio? Because they always kept him with them. And he said he's with the people on the boat, he's with the sailors, he's with our friends on the boat, different variations of that story. No one ever asked or was given the name of the boat or the name of the sailors. So the tracking becomes very difficult. One of them was told it was a 30-foot sailboat. My other older daughter was told that he was going to sail it down from Washington, which definitely didn't happen. It's sort of, in my mind, an alleged boat. I don't know if it ever existed. The story was that these people, the family members and friends were given, was that they were going to sail it to Hawaii for these friends, or with these friends, possibly. The last time that Storm was seen was June 7th, when my oldest son, Jome, dropped him off at Goleta Beach in Goleta, California, which is part of Santa Barbara County. It's like the north part of sort of connected city. There's Santa Barbara and Goleta. And the Goleta Beach where he was dropped off is right beside the UC Santa Barbara, a little town called Isla Vista out there, university town. They had bought a kayak on the way that Storm was going to row out to the boat, which was in the anchorage, assumably in the anchorage there. When Jome dropped him off, I asked if he saw a boat, and Jome said, that's my older son, he said, no, I had to rush off to work. So he dropped him off and then rushed off to work and didn't notice a boat, or didn't even look for a boat.
Okay, so let me ask you this really quickly before we go past this point. So just so I'm clear, so from between June 1st and June the 7th, family members and friends saw Gerald only.
So when I reported this missing persons to the police, I assumed that Adagio was with Gerald. And so on the posters that NECMEC made, and that's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as you know, but for other people, we just call it NECMEC. They made all these wonderful posters of, Storm and Dodge missing and the date and where they were missing from. And they just, of course, lumped Dodge in with Storm because that's what one would assume. But when you look at the details, and when it came to me at some point, no, Adagio hasn't been seen since he left the farm on June, they're saying 1st or 2nd. They can't get their story straight between the different people who live on the farm. But some think it was the 1st and some think it was the 2nd of June. But my son Joe recently sent me a photo, the last photo of his dad, known to us, that he took, and it's dated May 30th, and it's in Santa Barbara when Storm was there last. And he was dropping off his things with family members and friends, his valuables. His oldest son got a motorcycle and he dropped off his film equipment with his business partner. He gave a car and all his belongings to my oldest son, Joan. The car actually wasn't his to give. It belonged to the lady from the farm he was living on. She had lent it to him long term, and Joan brought it back to her.
So did you find all of that behavior to be strange? Did you find it to be out of the ordinary, out of character for him to do that? And why do that before going and taking a trip and coming back? You know what I'm saying? I guess that's the biggest question. I'm sure listeners are going to be like, well, why is he doing all this stuff?
It was all strange. I mean, my life with Storm from day one was strange and interesting and crazy and fun and wild. And, he was a very colorful individual, very fascinating personality, and so I found him magical. And that was sort of the attraction. And we had a really interesting run together, but we were together for 20 years and had 5 children, and they're all amazing. And separated from him since 2013. And getting some perspective on the situation, I can see that he was prone to paranoid delusions. He was suspicious of all institutions, all forms of government and the medical establishment, and you name it. There was a lot of fearfulness of most things. So that's why he was on a very alternative path with the raw vegan diet and living in the woods as much as possible, as in houses, but far out of cities. And he had he had said to me, when things would get really bad and difficult financially, he would say, what if we all just went to sea and died together? And I'm like, you say that like that's a good thing. He says, well, then I wouldn't have, I'm not going to be around much longer. He would say that often, ever since I've known him.
Jinjee says there were 3 alleged sightings of Adagio. The first was in November of 2018 in Hawaii, where multiple people reportedly saw Adagio and his father with shaved heads and faces. The second sighting was in December of 2018 at a cafeteria at USC in Los Angeles. And the final sighting of Adagio was in August of 2020 in Ventura, California. He was supposedly walking down the street near the beach. But remember, none of the reported sightings were ever confirmed. So at what point, just to make sure I understand, at what point or what day did you guys discover, hey, something's not right? I haven't heard from Adagio, what's going on here? What date was that, and what came to your mind to make you call the police?
This is an interesting question. I went in for brain surgery for a brain tumor on June 4th, so 3 days before they set sail. I didn't find out about the trip until a mutual friend was looking for Storm and Adagio and texted me saying, have you seen Storm and Dodge? And I said, no, I've been recovering from brain surgery. And I said, I'll find out where they are. So I called the people they lived with. I went on Storm's email because I still had his email password. And no one had seen him. My other kids, except for this, I found out from them that he had been planning to do this sailing trip to Hawaii. And that's when I found out from Joan that he had dropped him. I was, of course, horrified that I hadn't been informed. But, of course, I was. And they didn't know I was going in for brain surgery. At least not to my knowledge. My older kids did. They might have told them, but they don't remember telling them because I had asked them to not tell them. I went into Storm's email when I was trying to find out where they were, and I saw that he had purchased a ticket from Honolulu to LAX for September 1st.
Now, was it one ticket or two?
2 tickets, and him and Adagio's names. The lady who he had been staying on her farm, they had been living on her farm, I called her, of course, to find out, what she knew. And she said he was supposed to call her when he got to Hawaii, and she was going to fly out there and meet them. And she was really worried, and she filed a report with the Coast Guard. That was the first report that was filed. She was expecting him to arrive within 3 weeks and allowed 6 weeks. So it was probably end of July or so, and maybe beginning of August when she reported it to the Coast Guard. I had extensive talks with numerous Coast Guard officers who were on the case. And of course, I couldn't give them a boat name or boat owners, or they didn't file a sale plan with anyone, which they thought was very strange for doing an open sea adventure. But I told them about the ticket, and they all said, well, let's wait and see if they, they're just going to, they're doing whatever they're doing and they fly back and there won't really be a mystery or a case. I said, well, let's hope so. But September 1st came and went, and they did not use their tickets. And I talked to the airlines, and they hadn't canceled. They hadn't, they hadn't boarded. So that's when I filed a missing persons report with the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department. And Detective Travis Henderson there was our detective on the case. And that was probably early September.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Has there been, I don't know, I know you were, he was your ex-husband, but do you know of any activity on Storm's credit or any type of movement or anything? Have you ever been informed of anything since June the 7th of 2018? Has there been anything since then? He had a social media too, so I don't know how active he was with that either, but you have access to his email, right? You have
access to his email, to his PayPal account, to his iCloud, to his bank card associated with his PayPal account that I was able to get into, his Facebook. So we were in business together, and when we were married, and I had a list of all of our passwords I keep in one file, and he never changed those ones, so I was able to get in and try to track him down through those. There has been no activity. The last activity on all of those accounts that I've checked, I continue to check every now and then to see if there's been any new activity. The last activity was always June 7th on all those accounts. Yeah. So I don't know, did they throw away their devices before the trip? That's kind of what was in my head for a long time.
Well, I know you had this theory, right? So let me get into that really quickly. So I know I had, after doing some reading and research about the case, so you had this theory that perhaps they disappeared on purpose, that they were, kind of vanishing for some particular reason to escape something, or maybe saw something they weren't supposed to see. So how do you feel about that theory at this point?
Well, things have changed as of this past September, when Detective Travis Henderson contacted me to tell me that some remains that had been found back in July of 2018 on Goleta Beach had been shown to be a high probability match with my son Joan's DNA. That's my oldest son, and the one who lives in Santa Barbara, who saw Storm last. Detective Henderson took a DNA sample from Joan and compared it with the remains, it was actually the DOJ that compared it with the remains. And he just got back word in this past September that it was a high probability match. And it was an adult male's bones, remains. And so they think it was probably Storm. But he's taken a second sample from my oldest daughter now, and those results will come back in February. And I don't know why they need 2 samples. I think because DNA matching is not very precise in this type of situation. I don't know. The remains were pretty far gone. And So anyway, they wanted a second sample. We'll see how that goes.
I reached out to the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office for a comment, and officials say the cases are still listed as open and active missing persons cases. As for the remains that were found, I'm told that more DNA testing is needed to make a full confirmation. Investigators are still looking for leads in the case.
Have closure. The kids could have closure with their dad's situation at least. But July 24th and 26th is when the remains were found on Goleta Beach. I'm not sure which one was first, but one date it was the femur and tibia. They were leg bones. Mm-hmm. And the other date, I'm not sure which one was found first, was a torso. That was badly decomposed. Yeah.
Wow. So, let me ask you this question, and I'm sure people have asked this question at some point. Do you believe that Storm is capable of harming Adagio? Do you think that something sinister happened to Adagio, or do you believe that Adagio? Because I know there's been talk about sightings and things like that as well. Mm-hmm. So I want to get your thoughts on that at this point, because the whole thing is, it sounds unfortunate altogether, but I am curious as to how are you feeling with regards to your son still being out there somewhere? Because his body has never been found anywhere, correct? Just remains that they believe to be Gerald's, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So now that I kind of know that they're not together, it changes what I think happened. Before I thought, maybe they are sailing around the world. Maybe, Storm came into some money somehow, and they're just, borrowed or got a boat, and they're just sailing around the world, living the life of Riley. And that's kind of what I was hoping, and keeping it from me because I wanted Dodge to go to school. And Gerald never wanted our kids to go to school. So that's what I was hoping. And that he'd come back one day, and just tell me about his adventures. But now that I know he's out there alone, I wonder what happened during that week before Gerald set sail. Did Adagio run away thinking, I don't want to sail to Hawaii? Did he fall off a cliff? They were avid mountain climbers. They didn't use ropes a lot of the time. Did Storm put him somewhere? Did he stash him with a friend saying, make sure his mom doesn't get a hold of him? Don't call your mom. She's just going to, ruin you, and just wait here for me. Those are kind of some of the theories I have. Those are some of the more hopeful theories. Of course, everything goes through your head. And as a mom, I know that doing the research, of course, 70% of missing kids end up sex trafficked. So, of course, that's the worst nightmare is, if you ran away or got lost or something happened and he ended up in some sort of nefarious situation.
This is video and sound of Adagio practicing Let It Snow.
Merry Christmas.
At that time, he was only, 14?
Exactly. Yeah, just turned 14.
And was he a tall kid? What was his height and weight? Because he didn't seem like he was that big of a kid.
He was the runt of the litter. He was, he always looked a couple years younger than he was, so he would have looked like a 12-year-old at 14. He was starting to shoot up. And when kids grow, they get thin, they get real thin, because also being on the raw vegan diet. He was the last one to stay on the raw vegan diet because he chose to be with his dad, and his dad was raw vegan.
For that time frame, when you started to examine, Storm's spending activity during that week time frame, I imagine you looked at it. Did you notice anything, locations or anything in particular that he bought or anything like that?
He paid for a hotel twice, once in Fraser Park and once in Santa Barbara, a beach on the beach there, Avania Inn, and the one in Fraser Park, I think, was like a Best Western. And I called both the hotels to see if they had, stayed on those dates, and because he had reserved for two. He also sent $700 to a lady friend in Washington that he had met on the farm and had been sending money to now and then. And this was the day before he left.
Just to make sure we know, so there's no cause of death, right, for the remains that were found. They don't have any indication of that yet, or did they say?
Right. No, they say they're waiting for the coroner's report, I think. I'm not sure if, I would assume that those bones have already been through the, some sort of an autopsy, the remains, since they were like found 2 years ago, but more than two years ago. So, but I don't know. I think Travis just said, Detective Henderson just said that there was no suspicion of, no evidence of foul play.
In the area from when they first found the remains back then.
Okay.
Tell me about the last time you spoke to Daj.
This would have been on my birthday, May 28th, 2018. It was crackly because they had bad reception at the farm for cell phones. And we usually spoke over a Wi-Fi app. There was some talk about, maybe we're going to get some sailing time in. It was a maybe thing. It was nothing like specific, nothing to do with like where they were going or when or,
How did he sound? Did he sound happy? Did he sound like his regular self, nothing out of the ordinary?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah, just he was a happy little guy. Yeah.
So tell me about him. Tell me about his personality. Tell me about what is he good at. I saw the video of Adagio playing the xylophone. So he was, likes his little tunes and things like that. So tell me more about him, his personality, what he'd like to do, and how did he end up staying with his dad as opposed to leaving with you, like the other kids?
Adagio is really a fascinating character. He's absolutely lovable. Just everyone in the world is his best friend. He'll walk up to a person on the street. He walked up to a lady fishing one day and he said, we were at the beach, he goes, you shouldn't be eating fish. It's not good for you. He was really into the raw vegan diet. He really liked it. When he came to stay with me after the separation, when he was going back and forth between Gerald, who was living on his own boat at that time. He was in a slip in the harbor, in Santa Barbara Harbor, and I was living in an apartment in downtown Santa Barbara. And they would take the little trolley back and forth. And Daj would come, stay with me for a couple of days. And he didn't like cooked food. He didn't make the jump. I mean, he liked sugar, but he didn't like the texture of like cooked vegetables and rice and potatoes and things the other kids really liked. So one day he said to me, I think I'm going to live with Dad. There was a lot of back and forth and all the kids kind of going back and forth. But the girls had settled in with me, the older girls. Well, Raven was gone, but Shale had settled in with me and Joan had settled in with me. And Adagio said, I think I'm going to go stay with Dad on the boat. I think I'm going to stay with him. I don't want him to be lonely. And I said, well, that's kind of a moral choice. I'm not going to get in the way of that. He was all of, I guess, 8, 9 maybe at the time. He's more of an adventurer and a wild, loves the wilderness. He's a lot like his dad in a lot of ways. So I thought, well, that's probably a better, match for Daj. Like he'll be happier there.
I found the last video that Storm posted to his YouTube channel, and it's dated for June 6th, 2018, just one day before he was last seen and dropped off at Goleta Beach in Santa Barbara County by one of his sons. His plan was to row his kayak to the 30-foot boat where Adagio and unknown friends were waiting. In the video shot inside of a hotel room by himself, he proudly talks about how much he loved Savage Patch Farms and the raw vegan lifestyle, and mentioned how magical the farm was. The video also shows people working on the farm, including Adagio. Storm said the organic farm was off the beaten path on 30 acres of land inside of the Tahoe National Forest. And remember, Adagio was last seen on or around June 2nd by friends at the farm.
The main thing that I was trying to get them to do was to try to get Storm's phone records so we could see who he had talked to during that time leading up to the disappearance. Maybe we could find there a clue of who were these people who had a boat, or what else was going on in his life that might have given us a clue as to what really happened. If he didn't just take a boat and had an accident at sea. I don't think he got as far as a boat. If his bones washed up on the same beach that he left from in a kayak, I think could be, he only had the tiny little backpack with him, according to Joan. That's all he brought on the kayak. It could be that maybe he took an overdose of something and on purpose ended his life and washed ashore. I don't think if he had perished in an accident at sea way far out that his bones would have gotten back to the same beach he left from. Shantae has so many things go through my head. Well, I wanted to get the phone records to find out what happened. And they said they couldn't get the phone records because there had been no crime and they would need a warrant to get the phone records. I said, well, we have custody agreements that he's in violation of. I think that's a crime because he can't take the kid out of state without informing me in writing. And they said, well, we have no proof that he is out of state, that he did take him out of state. We don't know whether he's dead, and then there's no crime. And I said, well, if he's dead, then could you just get his phone records, if you're presuming him deceased, which they seem to have for a long time. And they said, no, phone records of deceased people are protected, which I think in this situation is kind of crazy. So I've just slowly been going through his contacts and, trying to talk to people who he may have, who I suspect he might have dropped Adagio off with.
So considering that you had access to kind of some financial stuff, email and all that, and you were not able to get the phone records, that was something that you just didn't have access to on your own?
I tried, but no, the phone company was not able to release any information to me.
How many searches were there? You said the Coast Guard got involved. How long did they search? Where did they search?
Coast Guard were amazing. Even though they had nothing to go on, no, name of the boat or owners of the boat, they put out alerts to all the commercial fleets and the whole Pacific, to all the harbors in Hawaii. They helped me to identify the boats that were in Goleta Anchorage at the time, early June there. And they even tracked only one of those boats had gone to Hawaii, and they tracked where it was now, and they had found that it was a woman sailing the boat solo, and it was in a race, and she had made it back to the U.S.
As far as the last person to actually see Adagio, that would be the woman who was on the farm, the lady who owned the farm.
There were about 5 people living on the farm, and people coming and going, helping work on the farm too. So I'm not sure which one of them would have seen him last, but
your last conversation with Storm, what was that conversation? Do you remember it?
We had an agreement to talk as little as possible, only when absolutely necessary, and if it was, concerning the kids and transferring them back and forth and whatnot. The last conversation that we had was via email, and he had emailed me saying, could you send me Adagio's birth certificate? When I was in his Gmail looking around, and there's a notes section, or it might have been in drafts, that he had written me an email that I never got about how they were going to get in some sailing time. And they were going to sail a friend's boat from Washington 200 miles out to sea with the friends. And if the friends didn't get seasick, they would continue on to Hawaii. But if anyone, the friends or daughters, got seasick, they would sail down to San Diego and drop them on the seasick people off.
How was the family dealing with the disappearance of both Storm and Adagio? How are you handling everything, emotionally? Because I know it's got to be hard. The mystery of, at least now, I guess, Adagio at this point, and kind of putting the final touches on what's happening, with Gerald. I've
been, grieving. And the problem with, ambiguous loss is you can't move on. There's no closure, So it just comes in waves. And so what I've had to do for myself is I allow myself an hour a day to just close the door in here and look at pictures and listen to sad songs and cry. And I just, bawl my eyes out for about an hour. And that allows me to go out there and just live my day like a normal person and take care of my other kids. And they're all kind of grieving, especially since this news of their dad's remains. They're grief stricken, I would say, because I think they had all hoped that, we would see them again. Raven, the oldest, is the only one who didn't believe that Storm was alive, because she said there's no way he wouldn't have contacted her and let her know what was going on. There was just no way. But now with the bones, I think she may have gone through a second wave of of grieving.
What would you say to people who have helped you over the years, with your searches and just trying to help get the word out about your son? What would you like to say to those folks?
Give me hope. And honestly, if I do pick up the phone and I hear Adagio's voice on the other end someday, it'll be because of you and your sharing. I'm always just really blessed every time, someone sends me a little heart, or I'm praying for you, all these sweet things that people send. But the shares, I go to each Facebook share that someone's shared, and I always put a heart on it just because I'm so grateful, so grateful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to people like you who are out there, helping via the media to get the word out, I couldn't be more thankful. You're doing such great work, and honestly, your reach is so major that it is so inspiring. It just really gives me hope, that getting this out there, I might find my son. I guess I really wanted to ask people who see this to look out for, that he would be tall and thin at this point. If his growth spurts happen like the older son, he could be 6 foot at 17, which he'll be in May. And he may have long curly hair. He might look like a girl. A lot of times people thought he was a girl because he kept his hair really long. It might be a mess, or it might be shaved. I don't know what he's doing now. Of course, he'd be a young man, whereas when I knew him, he was a scrawny kid, So if he's a, science genius, but he can't figure out how to find me, I worry that, he may have been brainwashed or damaged somehow, out there if he's alone on the streets. For some reason, he doesn't seem to be able to find his way home, which is really heartbreaking.
Do you feel like inside that he is alive? Do you sense that he's still alive?
That's a really good question. And I think I do because I want to. But I did have a vision. I was sending him, this was maybe 6 months to a year after I knew he was missing. I sent him a hug one night just before I was going to bed and everyone else was asleep. And it was a virtual hug, mind. And I had a vision of him. It was so clear in my mind to this day. And he was saying, "I'm with God, silly." And it was his face, his smile, his cheeky little mischievous glinting eyes, and he was happy. And I held on to that vision. It gave me such comfort.
If Adagio is able to hear this or see this podcast, what would you say to him?
Adagio, I love you. I miss you so much. And I would love to have you home with me. I want to, just make sure you're okay. And I just want to give you a hug that lasts about 5 hours. And just be able to look into your eyes.
When it comes to my final thoughts about this case, I do wonder, is Adagio still alive? And if so, what happened? According to Jinjee, investigators believe that Storm's remains that were found within a few months of his disappearance have been identified by DNA. But again, more testing is needed. Yet, Adagio is still nowhere to be found. But the question is why? Is he still out there somewhere with friends that his father left him with? Is he living on the streets? Or did he die before or at the same time as his father? And here's another mystery. What about Storm? I mean, he gave his possessions away before he disappeared to family and friends. And I'm wondering about his state of mind. And if there's a chance that he took his own life, and if so, why did he do it? Another thought is someone else responsible for his death, or was Storm's death an accident? But again, police are still trying to confirm some DNA and the cause of death of the remains that were found. Meanwhile, there are at least 3 reported sightings of Adagio in Southern California and in Hawaii, but so far nothing has panned out. But I am hoping that the family can get some degree of closure to put an end to this mystery. Adagio would be 16 years old today. If you have any information in this case, you can call the family at 250-797-7001 or the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office at 805-681-4150. If you have a case that you want me to check out, just visit me on the Intrigued Full Effect Facebook page or email me at intruguedfulleffect@hotmail.com. Until next time, be safe and stay true. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Intrigued Full Effect, Curious Cases, Disappearances, and Other Stuff podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the host. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. The host of this podcast assumes no liability or responsibility for any activities in connection with opinions shared in the podcast. The podcast and blog associated with it shall not be used in any legal capacity or as a basis for expert testimony. Any copyright material in the podcast is approved by the owner or is part of the public domain. Music by Pond 5.